Hey guys, welcome back. Today we've got for you the Los Angeles Kings recap of the 2022-23 season, and then we'll take a look at the outlook on the upcoming 23-24 season as well. So I'll get us kick-started straight into the recap. No stuff asking around. The Los Angeles Kings finished 10th overall in the NHL standings with 47 wins and 104 points. And yeah, look, we go by the NHL standings just to give you a general overview of how they looked against everyone else. But in the scheme of things, in their own division, they were third behind the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights. Ultimately, they faced the Edmonton Oilers in the first round and unfortunately fell victim to them, and that ended their season in a pretty dramatic fashion. They looked like they were going to get up in that series, and then there was just a period where I think it was Jack Campbell came into net and just saved everything, and pretty much just killed any hope that the Kings had. The Kings looked like they were going to run away with it and just couldn't get it past him. And ultimately, Edmonton went and leveled it and then won the game in overtime. And it was pretty much downhill from there. I think the Kings would have gone 3-1 up in that series, but ultimately fell to the Oilers in six. It was an interesting season for them overall. I think there was a lot of doubt early on to whether or not they could maintain it. They weren't playing that great defensively. They were leaking a few goals here and there. So I know ourselves, we thought that there was eventually going to be a time that just sort of crumbled. However, they really pulled themselves together defensively and just kept finding ways to win throughout the season, and actually started playing some really really quality hockey in the end. But ultimately, I think I came undone with the lack of probably quality goaltending, with obviously Jonathan Quick on the back burner, and players like Phoenix Copley and that. So unfortunately, I feel like that also let them down in the playoffs as well. So they had overall a pretty exciting season for where this team is at, finishing third in their division again, putting up a pretty quality season in what it was, and then unfortunately, burning down in the first round. But overall, it's sort of, there were some good signs, but just some disappointing signs to the back end of that they couldn't push it further, probably because of the reason that they struggled a little bit throughout the season as well in terms of their goaltending. So we'll talk about that in the outlook, but that's probably one of the areas that if they could fix, this team could go, a bit deeper in the playoffs. So, but yeah, that's it for the recap. First round exit for the LA Kings. Probably not what the Kings fans were hoping for, but when you come up against the McDavid, Draisaitl, Edmonton Oilers, unfortunately, if you don't have goaltending, they are going to shred you to pieces, which is pretty much what happened. So anyway, I'll hand you off to Jaden now to take you through the 2023-24 projected lineup.
Alrighty. So we are under the cap just by 120,000. We've got two roster size spots left. But we also have, in regards to first line, Byfield, Kopitar, and Kempe. This is per cap friendly. Byfield probably doesn't play first line. We'll have to wait and see. But he was playing like third line minutes last year. You got Fiala, Dubois, who's been traded in, and then Arvidsson on the second. Moore, Danault, and Kaliev on the third. Then Grunstrom, Lizotte, and Lewis on the fourth. So, yeah, it's an interesting forward line overall. Moving on to defenders, we got Anderson and Dowdy on the first, Gavrikov, Roy on the second, Jeanfoot and Clark on the third. Goalies, Copley, Talbot, and Riddich. Two of those brought in via free agency this offseason. Scratches, Anderson, Dolan, Fagamo, England, and Alex Turcotte. I put him down there just to see if he does break out this year. because he was the number 5 overall pick in 2019, and he hasn't really turned out quite the way everybody expected him to. But I expect that he could probably play a little bit more this year if he does develop. Notable losses, it's a big list here. I won't go through who they went to, but Anderson, Corpusalo, McEwen, Villalta, Dursey, Pedersen, Walker, Velarde, Iafallo, and Kupari. So pretty hefty list there. And considering how hefty that list is, there's not many additions into this team besides Dubois, who was in that big trade. So it's interesting to see how they're going to replace all those notable losses with what they've brought in, which basically just depth and then Dubois. So very interesting. Only other noteworthy thing, no 2022 players brought in from ELCs. Only Dvorak from this year on the left defense. But they do have Jack Hughes, not the right one, but they do have Jack Hughes. I guess the last thing I'll end before I pass it off. Power play was 4th best in the league at 25.3% at the top right there. Penalty kill 24th in the league. So obviously a big discrepancy from their power play to penalty kill, and a lot of that does rely and probably highlights the goaltending that they had. Goals for and goals against 10th and 16th respectively, so not bad. That's what gets you into playoffs. So honestly, all they had to do was really fix up that PK, which really is your goaltending in a lot of cases. And you could say they do that in a sense because obviously Corpusalo leaves. They get Talbot and Riddich, and if Talbot has a bounce back year, it could be completely different. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this team that's done a big overhaul in a sense?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I don't really feel like they brought in Cam Talbot and David Ritchie, but I question whether it's they're just hoping that they'll fill out with backup goalies and one of them will pan out. But Cam Talbot's done it before and put up reasonably good numbers across a 30-game span of a season. But yeah, I just so he could do it. Like it's not impossible for Cam Talbot to have 30 odd games where he puts up a 9, 10, 9, 15 save percentage. But yeah, I feel like that's the area they lacked last year. It's the area that let them down big time last year, and I don't really feel it's improved in any way. They're really banking on one of these three, whether it's Copley, Talbot, or Richie if he plays. But yeah, I'm just not sure that they needed a true goaltender because it was the area that let them down last season. And as far as the rest of the side goes, their defense doesn't really get weaker in a sense. Brant Clark, I'm really interested to see what he can produce because there's been massive raps on that kid. Can he come in and really put his stamp on put his mark on this team? Because he could be a huge help in on that blue line. I feel like he's got great potential, and if he takes off, then that's where I feel like this team's going to get growth from. Is the likes of Brant Clark coming in and taking off, Quinton Byfield finally having that breakout season. Pierre-Luc Dubois, I feel like a lot is going to be put on him because like he's his third team now. He's supposed to be this out and out superstar. Come on, let's show us what you can do. You're supposed to be the one taking over from Kopitar when he finally hangs up the boots. But yeah, you look at the losses that they got rid of, and they lose Velarde and Iafallo, Kupari as well. But the more notable ones, Iafallo and Velarde, you're handing off a fair amount of points there. And yep, Dubois probably can cover that in a sense, or most of that. But they haven't really done anything else. So they've lost a couple of players there, haven't really replaced them other than the Dubois situation. So I feel like where these guys are resting on is those players like Byfield, Clark, in them stepping up and taking a step forward to being that sort of, okay, yeah, we didn't bring in much because we feel like we've got the pieces and we feel like our young prospects are going to make that next step forward. But yeah, again, I just feel like that looking at that goaltending situation, it terrifies me for this team because I feel like if they have a step back at all, or Byfield and doesn't, finally have their breakout season and just continues to, like, he showed glimpses last year of being, a really solid player. So hopefully he continues that. But if he doesn't and he starts to go backwards or just doesn't get to that next level, you question whether or not they'll have that, same power that they did last year. And with that goaltending situation, if that's still a problem and they're still leaking goals like crazy in, at times, are they going to be able to bounce back from it? And I'm expecting, the likes of Calgary to have a bounce back season. I dare say Seattle's still going to be relatively strong. Edmonton and Vegas, we know, are probably going to be, again, just as strong as they were last season. So that's 4 teams in the Pacific that are going to be competing against them. So if they're not careful, they could find themselves out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When you lose, Velarde, Iafallo, even Corpusalo, who was really brought in mid-season, but you lose those big names who, big points, or basically your best goalie, in a sense, it's gonna hurt. The Talbot contract and Riddick contract, like they're no risk because 1 year, 1 mil or less, it's basically no risk. But it is a big risk when like you're relying on Copley, basically. So you're either relying on Copley to do half the games, and then you're relying on Talbot to have some sort of bounce back to his past 3 previous seasons. So that is the scary part for him, and that's what worries me about LA is they're kind of in a win now mode. They've been building this team for a while. Kopitar's, Dowdy kind of at the getting at the end there. Even though they kind of define aging somewhat, but they're kind of in win now mode, and I don't think this goaltending tandem or set of 3 is going to do it for you. I could I could sit behind this defense somewhat and be like, all right, I can sit like behind the forward line a little bit, though I'd like it probably another piece added somewhere. Though obviously the salary cap does not allow that, unless you're doing a big upgrade. The other thing I want to note is like they were kind of built for it this year because they got a lot of RFAs. 3 of them on the forward line, and was it 3 on the scratches there. Maybe it's 4 on the forward line. That's our yeah, it's 4. RFAs this year, and that means they're most likely going to get pay rises. Most likely, I know, like Byfield, depending how he goes, he's going to get more than 900,000. Lizot's at his end, though. We'll see if he develops even further. But you got Kaliev, who could have a breakout year. You got Grunstrom, and then obviously you got Ennis Dolan for Gima, and then Turcotte. If he does actually become a NHLer this year at some point, then what does he get paid? Obviously that's a big if, but that is what worries me is that they're at the cap already. They've got a very cheap, if not one of the cheapest, goaltending trio in the league, and it's just a lot of it's spent on Dowdy, and then just their forward line. There's a lot of big money on that forward line, and I think it needs to be somewhat distributed a little bit better. So I'm not sure if the Dubois pickup was probably the best when you have a look at the final piece roster that they've set up here for this year. I think they could have probably gone down a different route and found some goalie that 3 million or so that is worth 3 million or so, and I feel like that's where they've probably gone wrong here. They've got a lot of depth. They're pretty much all the signings this year have been in the free agency and whatnot have been depth. So they've added depth. they got another big name in Dubois, but they had to get rid of a few big names in the process to do that. So yeah, it's a bit iffy. And I'd with all this adding and additions and the goaltending, I don't see the PK getting better. The only big signing there on the fourth line is Lewis for their depth, and I don't think he's going to add that greatly to their PK. It's not going to change it into a top 16. Power play was good, but obviously you got rid of big players like Iafallo, Velarde, and whatnot. So I don't know. Like, where do you go from here with the cap situation? You've signed Dubois. You've got now huge contracts in Kopitar, Fiala, Dubois, and Doughty. It's got almost reminiscent of Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they also retained what 30% of Ivan Provorov's contract as well. So, which I get they cleared Cal Peterson off their books, which was great. But yeah, it's and I get it. You do have to give something at some point. So there was always going to be the trade off there, but that just hurts as well. Having to hold that $2 million when you don't really have any cap space as it is. They've got Arvidsson coming off contract at the end of the year, and Matt Roy as well at reasonable contracts. But again, they're not players that you want to lose either. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here, because you're right, they don't have any cap space left. So this team is pretty much what they've got, unless they can pull off a trade of some sorts. But again, who are you going to really sacrifice? At this point, they're not going to trade out a Drew Doughty. They're not going to trade out Anthony Kopitar, obviously. I mean, that would be one of the biggest slaps in the faces of a franchise sort of legend. Yeah, so basically what they've got is what they've got. This is the team that's going to get the job done for them. It's just a real question mark around it. Last season, Calgary struggled big time. They didn't have too much competition in the from the Central either in terms of wildcard spots. So, last season again, finishing third, they only really had Seattle, who were just sort of making their mark and having one of those just insane seasons that no one saw. But outside of that, no one in the Pacific was really any good. Like Calgary made a late charge towards the end there. And don't get me wrong, LA still played a really good hockey throughout the season, but I'm not sure that they improved this season, especially when they haven't really addressed that goaltending situation. Could be wrong. Cam Talbot might come out and be an absolute beast and, play 40 games and just put up ridiculous numbers. And Phoenix Copley might, he might do the same. They might have a great 1-2 tandem with those two and put up fantastic numbers. And this whole thing would be a laughing stock. We'll replay it at the end of the season and be like, sorry guys, my bad. They proved us wrong. But when you look at it from the outside and go, you're taking a massive gamble on that, because it's not like you're gambling it on a prospect who has been coming through looking good, and you're like, he might be ready to break out. You sort of, Cam Talbot's aging. Copley's never really been too much in terms of a full-time goaltender, and he's 31 years of age. So yeah, it's not like these guys are young or anything. So for them to just turn around and all of a sudden be like, yeah, we're back to being NHL superstars, it's hard to see that happening. So I think we're going to see much of the muchness in this season from what we saw last season in terms of goaltending. And the big question for me is, can that blue line shield it enough and can that forward line score enough goals to sort of counteract that? Because they're going to have to do quite similar to what they did last year. Like if this goaltending is going to stay the same, they're going to have to put up 3.3 plus goals a game. Once again, they can't see a drop off in goal production.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like the way I look at it is they're pretty much putting all the weight on doing what they did last season and doing better on Dubois, because that's pretty much all the big addition here. And he's basically there to stem up all the issues that they had last season, which I just don't see how when you're going to rely that heavily on one person, and then you got to rely on Talbot having a bounce back year. We've already said that he's an aging man, so I expect that he could. I believe he is that caliber, but obviously the way it goes generally is the older you get, the worse you get. So it'll be interesting to see if he can defy that, and if he doesn't, then I don't know if Copley's like a .915 type of goalie. I think he's probably a 905 at best type of goalie. So yeah, well, I don't see the PK getting better because of that, and I feel like that was your big gripe last year, and your discipline and whatnot. So I just don't see they've addressed the kind of the issues that I feel like they needed to. I know Dubois is the big name and stuff, and he does round out the
Yeah,
core and
but
the top six, but
in saying that, like you look at Dubois' numbers, and I know he's probably done it for longer, but he only scored 27 goals in 73 games, 63 points overall last season. And then you look at Velarde, who they gave away, who scored 23 goals in 10 less games, only 41 points overall, so not as many assists, but his production's still there, and he's coming through. Like he's only what 25 games the season before, 54 the season before that, so he hasn't really stepped into his own. So Velarde could well and truly, especially with a bigger role, could 100% up those numbers yet again, and we could see Velarde put up 30 plus goals this year, which is something that Dubois has yet to do in his career. So, I just look at it and go, well, if Velarde does do that and does turn into a 30 goal scorer, how much have they gained from the Dubois trade overall? If Velarde turns into a 30 goal scorer and Dubois just remains at what he's produced over his career so far, like, what they've given up, is it worth? Because Iafalo, he's still got the 2 years left on his contract as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at it and just wondering whether or not that was. I get you've got to make a big call sometimes, and you got to ruffle some feathers and change some things up. Dubois is a quality player. I'm not arguing that. I'm just questioning what that looks like if Velarde absolutely turns it on this year and Dubois just remains a 60 to 70 point player that he's been throughout his career. Is
yeah.
it going to be that thing that they gave up too much to get a player who's doing similar to one of the players they've given up?
Well, it'll be
So
interesting to see how much they distribute the ice time for him with Kopitar, and with Danoa's there as well. Dano was averaging the same minutes that Dubois was, so I don't know how you're gonna differentiate who gets the better ice time there. Like they have a good third line, like points per game was like 0.5 or up for those three players, but they're all negative in a plus minus, which was a little bit worrying. But they have great depth. But it's just one of those things where they've got to juggle that. I have gripes with their PK. Obviously, the goaltending. I don't know what prospects they've got coming through to help replace. Like they have been drafting somewhat well. Like their whole first line right there is drafted. Granted, Kopitar was in 2005. You got you got Lizotte, who was picked up from undraft. The whole entire defense besides Gavrikov is drafted. So they've done good in regards to building around the draft. Granted, they're like the whole second line and basically like half their third line is traded or um free agency, but I feel like they've built well around the draft. I would just like to see another couple of key prospects come through, like a Turcotte. I feel like that's probably the linchpin for this team. And if they get alright goaltending, sure, but if they get another rookie that can play, 50, 60 games this year, I feel like that would be key for them to really push forward because, like I said, they got good depth. They balanced the minutes well. Obviously, Doughty not really with 26 minutes averaged compared to the next highest being 22. So they rely heavily on Doughty to play a lot of minutes and obviously back ending the power play and whatnot. But yeah, I'm just a little bit worried that this goaltending situation. I feel like maybe they're going to take a step back. I know they're playing a decent system, though at times it looked really horrible. The way they were playing, turnovers. It was like I think it was LA versus Winnipeg, which is one of the worst games I've seen. I think it was at LA. It was just turnover city, and it was just like, oh my god, is this NHL? So, but then they come out and they fire and get playoffs, and they were playing alright, but then ultimately got undone. So I don't know. I can't, even if they make the playoffs, they make top three in the division or whatnot. I can't see this team unless like a heroic run
Getting
from
past.
some goalie getting past like a first round, second at best. But yeah, can't even see it getting past the first round.
Yeah, you do have to question whether or not this team would be good enough to get past an Edmonton or a Vegas. Because as I said in the recap, that was the problem. Your goaltending is the issue all season, and then you come up against Edmonton, who you give McDavid and Draisaitl an opportunity, and they're going to take it and they're going to bury it. And they did reasonably well in containing McDavid, but yeah, it was always going to end poorly when you don't have goaltending to back you up. And unfortunately, it doesn't really look like they fixed or addressed that issue. I get that they brought in Talbot. They literally brought in two goaltenders, but I feel like they brought in two backup goaltenders, and you've got to ask yourself: is Copley a true number one? And I think the answer to that is no. He might
Yeah,
prove us wrong. He
that's
might
the thing.
come
They don't
out
have a true number one.
and fire.
They got three backups. That's probably the biggest problem
Yeah,
here. Is they have no true number one. They got three backups fighting for the most minutes for goaltending position. So yeah,
yeah.
I got nothing else more to add there except that I'm expecting probably a surprise season from one of these goalies to help push LA. I'd probably put my boat in regards to Talbot doing it, just on a
Mm,
bounce back year. But that's about it. I can't see them PK getting too much better. That power play was really really good, but can you repeat it? You've just gotten rid of two
mm.
big pieces, and like goals for and goals against was good. That's what gets you in the playoffs, and I think they can do that again. But I just once you make it to playoffs, I don't think this team can do much more. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think this season for them is going to go one or two ways. The goaltending issue is going to come out and surprise us, and we're going to either see one of these goaltenders just be lights out, or not even lights out, but a good performing goaltender. It might even be that the two of them do it, or we're going to see the same issues they had last year. And I just don't know if they can carry through that this season. And we'll ultimately, I feel like, with Calgary on the way up, which, I mean, we could be wrong about that as well, but it looks like, Calgary should have a bounce back season. It's going to be hard to see them making the playoffs if that goaltending is an issue for them again this year. I think if it's an issue, I'm not sure they're going to have it in them to hold off the likes of Seattle and Calgary.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Let us know what you think below on the LA Kings and how their future plans out for this year. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel with all notifications on. And we'll see you guys for the next video. Until next time, catch you guys.
See you guys.